Hello, my sweet, lovely Denise Ramon at deniseramon.com. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good. Hi, Erik. I love you.
He says, "Hi, Mama." He says, "I love you."
Thank you.
He's feeling real chipper and just like being silly the way he's jumping around.
I know
So,
I love you too.
aw.
I love you too. Oh, baby, I love you. Now get away. I'll give you a present later. That's code word for treats. Anyway, all right, we're going to talk about gender identity and gender dysphoria.
Okay. And Eric says he's doing this. He's ready. He says, this should be. He says this should be good. A lot because he says there's a lot of questions because it's like he says it's like a circle and everybody has a say so or an
Yeah,
opinion about it. So he said, yeah,
absolutely.
this will be good.
All right, well, let's start with question number one. This is all from the community, by the way.
Okay.
Erik, why are people born with gender dysphoria? Definition: a sense of unease that a person may have because of a mismatch between their biological sex and their gender identity.
Well, Eric says, he's going to give us some history, he says. So
Okay.
he said there was a time eons ago that we didn't have a gender. We just were.
Yeah.
It just we just were. We didn't identify with male or female. We just were. We just was. And he says, so it's not like a new word or a new fad that people are saying I'm fluid now. He says
Okay.
that's really the appropriate word to use because we were fluid before.
Well, how long ago
Eons.
are we talking about?
Oh,
Before we were on Earth? Or
no, no, because I feel like the way he says, like, we were that here, but then it just kind of shifted and changed. So he says thousands of years ago,
okay.
because there was a time when we were here before the Jesus days, he said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we finished with that answer?
Well, I know. I was like, Eric, and he said, um, so now, and it's predominantly younger people coming in. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule. And he says, but they're not identifying with their body and what they came in as. And he says, some think that they came in with is a mistake, like they changed it last second and they're not agreeing with it. He says he's not going to say that's not the possible answer for some. But it's also, he says, that people come in with that, saying they're a female and they really think that they feel like a male. It's almost like part of them is helping to, on some hand, helping us to shift our belief systems. And he says, probably 50 years from now, we'll have a better way to handle it. But how people are handling it now is the best way.
Yeah. Yeah, because before, humans tend to label and sort and compare, and that's just part of the human paradigm. But so you're saying that these, especially younger children coming in, they want to dispense with the labels and the comparisons and the sorting.
Correct.
Are these
Correct.
crystals or indigos, or is it a preponderance of one of those type of groups?
He says it's all, really. It's all. And he's
Okay.
telling me there was a time back when we were thousands of eons ago that we were born with both genitals in a
Oh,
way. It's
wow.
almost like, we,
Hermaphroditic kind of almost.
yes, yes. And he said exactly, and whatever we felt prone at the time is what genitals we used at the time. He says we were able to I don't know how you would do it though. But he's saying we're able to.
I'm getting all sorts of graphics in my mind.
I know, I'm sitting here
Lining
going,
up.
how did, figuring one goes in and the other one comes out, or vice
I
versa.
don't know.
I don't know, but he's saying, there was a time when that happened,
Fascinating.
that is. And he says, so it's, but the younger groups, and it's all kinds that are coming in to show us, and it's not just to show us, but it's almost like people would say we're going backwards in time, because now it's bringing forth that we don't have to conform to whatever is,
Or maybe it's a little circle instead of going backwards.
correct, that's a better word, because he's showing me this, so it is full circle. He said,
Okay.
yes.
Are people born with, or do they develop it due to childhood trauma? I'm some. I guess this person, if both cases are true, what is the percentage assigned to both? People that are just born gender fluid, or
Erik says the born.
dysphoria could be partly due to childhood trauma in some cases, but I don't know about wanting to be a gender fluid. But go ahead. I don't know what I'm talking
Well,
about.
Erik says not being, no, that doesn't happen from their upbringing or that wanting to be gender fluid. That's a totally different thing on something like that. That is different. Now, there's some who have where they don't like their body or whatever because of the dynamics of their household or whatever happened and stuff like that. But as far as wanting to transition from one to the other, Erik says he's not going to go 100%, but he says it's 99.9% that it is not due to the family dynamics
Or trauma.
because or trauma. And when he says that, I'm thinking, I wouldn't think that it would be either. I mean, that would, to me, that's just a constant hell they're in, until they can come to an okayness and acceptance within their own selves.
Yeah. All right. So there have been people who have done the transition surgery, like mastectomy, etc., when they're adolescents, but then grow up and think, oh no, I should not have done that. So how much of this is adolescent confusion and shame for their bodies and things like that, shame about sex? And do you think that children should wait until they're completely mature before they chop off their breasts or anything like that?
Erik says, well, he says it's a case by case situation because some people, are, it's a matter of life or death, literally, he said. But he says, for the general population, he says, it is better to wait till they're older, like at least 17, 18 or a little older, because when you're digesting all those hormones and everything, you have not finished developing. And when he says developing, he's talking about your growth. This is about for every parts of our body,
including the brain, where a lot of learning and stuff goes on during that period.
Correct. And he says, and to have these hormones, which they're synthetic, having those go in you to do this transition, it's really not, it's very challenging on the body. And he says, and that is something that they are looking at. I don't know if they've announced it, but it is something that they're looking at, the long-term effects of taking these type of hormones doing them, these kids taking it, not just kids, but young adults as well, taking that.
Like puberty blockers, basically.
Yeah, and he says, and that has an issue with, as you said, the development of the brain and everything, and how everything, you show me how everything filters down. So it's because some people who are born as a male but feel they're a woman, some of them later on are just okay being in this body and not wanting to alter it in any way.
Oh yeah, of course.
They have found a way to be 100% okay and live a very happy life. So he says it's important to, it's important for the parents to support their children, but not to, it's best if they can wait a longer time to do the hormone replacement, and especially the surgical stuff.
Okay. So this one person says, are there genuinely this many children wanting to change their gender, or have some of them just gotten caught up in this trend? Or is it even a trend? I don't know.
Well, Erik is telling me, and he's reminding me of something. I remember transgenders back in the 70s.
Yeah.
When I lived in Miami Beach, there were a lot of them that would come through there and work until they made enough money to go to Europe to go get the rest of their surgery done. They would get from the top up done,
Right.
but the rest. And so this isn't new. It's just it's social media, you know.
Talked about more. It's
Yes, and the news and all of
awareness.
that. The media is made it very popular. Now we all have access to this stuff. Is it more talked about now? Of course it is, due to social media and everything. So it's, I'm asking, is there an influx of trans people, or, you know, or people who, he said, he doesn't want to say there's an influx of it, you know, of people coming in, feeling like they should be in a different body.
Yeah.
But there is an awareness coming through. He's what he says.
That sounds reasonable. Are people who are not comfortable with their gender that were born with wanting to be a different gender because they were a different gender in a previous life? Oh, that's a good question. I mean, maybe they had such a wonderful life as a male, and then they come in as a female.
You know, I thought
Or
of
they
that.
had this soulmate that a man in a past life fell in love with a woman in a past life. They had a wonderful, wonderful romantic life together, and then the man comes in as a woman, and maybe even cross paths with that same woman.
You know, I thought of that about 15 years ago. I had that discussion with my sister-in-law. Like, I wonder if they had like a past life regression, you know, to go back to, because usually, you know, you will go back to something that's real important, significant at this time. I had wondered if that would have been of some help. And Erik says, for a small portion, it could help.
But it's not a big percentage then.
No, but for a small portion, it could bring some closure. But when he says that, it's not just anybody doing that does past life regressions. It has to be somebody that's really knows how to do those efficiently. Because he said there are people that do past lives, but it's more of a what would you call it, a novelty thing, like they can do it, but
entertainment only. Yeah.
yes, entertainment only. But he says for a small percentage that could help. And he says, don't think though that some of these people who are concerned about transitioning haven't approached that aspect as well, he says.
Okay. I'm a woman from the Netherlands. When I was very young, I wanted to be a boy. When I went into puberty, I could accept my female body, and since then I feel half man, half woman. I always wondered why I felt and feel this way. And is it again because of past incarnations or a lesson I have to learn? I mean, we don't know this woman's name, but
well, Erik says that one definitely is, it is previous life. You know, she has a little bit of residue, bleed through, whatever you want to call it, from a previous life in that. But she definitely does not want to be a male.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are most of the genderqueer non-binary people starseeds? And is there a specific, if so, is there a specific star system they come from?
Erik says there's a good portion of them. And when he says that, I'm like, are you talking about me too, Erik? But he says there's a good portion that come in through there. Yes. And he says it's not one particular place. You know, it's
many star systems.
Yes.
Okay. Why are school officials and the government pushing medical intervention at such young ages, or are they? And also, I would add medical facilities that are sometimes, you know, doing interventions without the parental consent, I think.
Well, Eric says because they're freaked out. He says it's a lack of control on their part on so many levels, so they're got to get control of it. It's so widely publicized
Yeah.
that it's freaking them out. He says there, and then there's people who are freaked out about it, go to the government people to say you have to do something about this.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do. It's kind of like somebody that comes to school with a leg cut off. They don't know what to do with it. That person, they just stare and don't know what to do, and then they try and make up all these regulations and rules about how that kid's going to be able to come to school and interact and do all this other stuff. He says they just don't know. And he says some of them people are scared to death that it's going to come off on them, just like he says it's just like anything. He says it's like they're afraid of it. They're ignorant. They don't know anything about it. So to not know anything about it, they do what they only know how to do about it, and that's to squash it and try to put a lid on it. He says, but you can't do that with this.
No. Why can't, this is the second part of this person's question, why can't kids be allowed to figure it out on their own as they mature?
Well, Erik says, well, that's a good question. And, why can't they? And he says, because, you have parents that don't allow it, and then they don't have the freedom, especially at schools, to be who they are. As you said earlier, he says about being labeled, and then you're labeled as a freak or whatever. And if you act different, like he says, they may want to come to school one day with a dress on and carry a purse, and the next day they want to wear jeans and whatever, but they're going to be picked on and bullied. He says bullied.
Bad.
And so that's a good question. He says that's where educating the adults, so the adults can educate the children,
right?
Because the kids don't know anything about it until they hear things.
Do you think that children should be allowed to have these interventions, whether it's medication or surgery, without parental consent?
Well, Erik says, it's they're contradicting themselves, because they cannot treat a child without parental consent. A medical doctor cannot do any kind of treatment or anything without parental consent, but they can on this. So what's the difference?
Yeah.
He says they shouldn't be allowed to.
Yeah. So Erik, you think that the parents should be able to give consent because they know their children better than the doctors, etc.
Yes, but then Erik says, but then you get into that where the parents are all on board. Yes, give them all this medicine so they don't think anymore, and then that messes them up till when they do become an age, But
and then
Erik
they say, "Oh, I shouldn't have let my parents force this issue."
Well, yeah, and then they have to go through a whole nother, that there's even more trauma they have to work through on that.
Should they undergo counseling before they make their ultimate decisions? Especially in some sessions, including their parents or their guardians.
Erik said yes, and it's not but to go to someone in counseling who is very well adversed in this, who doesn't have an opinion either way. He says, but someone to educate them on what's going to go, what's not going to go, and educate the parents where they can best support their children in this. He said, so yes, and it's also too so that they have a safe place to go voice their concerns and
exactly
what's going on. Yeah.
Oh, be quiet. Are some of these kids ET hybrids? I know a woman who was teaching fifth graders, and one mother came and asked her if they could put a litter box in the girls' bathroom because the daughter identified as a cat. No joke. So I guess I'm wondering, how serious do we take this if kids are younger, like a fifth grade?
Well, Erik says that's a special case.
Yeah.
That's a special case. That's what he's just saying about that.
Okay. So anyway, are some of these ET hybrids, these kids?
Oh, yes. He said, oh, yes.
And what percent? I mean, is it a big percent of them or?
He says it's a significant amount. And when I'm asking him, is it 50%? I don't get that it's 50% what he's saying, but it's not. I'm like, is it 40%? And he said, yeah, we can go with that. He says 38%.
38.5%. Well, you know, I understand there are probably aliens that have both sets of genitalia or have no
Yes.
gender. So, all right. Lately there's been an entire movement in the Western world supporting hormone therapy and gender reassignment surgery starting from a very young age. Like they're giving puberty blockers to kids pre-puberty. Are we doing more harm than good with these medical interventions? And what's the spirit's perspective on gender reassignment surgery? I think we kind of covered that already, but
Yeah, well, Erik says again, doing it at a young age, is not a good thing. That's like letting a 10-year-old have plastic surgery on their nose, or
guess
letting
what? That nose is still forming.
right,
Brain is still changing.
correct, or letting a 12-year-old girl who hasn't developed yet given her breast implants.
Yeah.
That
Those are good analogies, Erik. Yeah.
he says, thank you. And he's saying, so it's not a good idea, and he says it's like that's one extreme to the other extreme, and both are not good. We have to find a balance in there.
Right.
And he says, and things like this, and education on this is going to help. Education.
Yeah.
But everybody's so freaked out because they don't know anything. And he says, ask them questions, ask them.
Okay. Does this new movement have a spiritual basis to raise the collective to accept that children should be allowed to change their gender, or is it strictly a man-made construct for power? As an educator for over 25 years, we were taught that over-sexualizing young children was very dangerous to their development and that gender dysphoria does exist.
Is it? I lost all that. Sorry.
I know it's too long. Does this movement have a spiritual basis to raise the collective awareness to accept children should be allowed to change their gender, or is it a man-made construct for power?
Erik says no, it's not man-made.
Yeah.
They're man-made trying to turn it around or get a grip on it or take control of it. But
Yeah.
this isn't man-made because these kids and adults,
Yeah.
they start knowing something is way off base with them by the time they're as young as 2 and 3 years old.
Yeah. Interesting.
And so, this isn't man-made. Is there a spiritual enlightenment from it or an awareness? Of course there is, because
we talked about that.
we are being forced to, not forced, but we have to look at this differently. And and it's becoming more public, and there's more help, and not just more help, but there are more kids committing suicide because of this.
Yeah.
And what I liked is, and I heard somebody, the Judd daughters, say that their mother died from mental illness. And that's what I would like to say about, there's a lot of people dying from this, because due to mental illness, because they're not being supported.
Yeah.
And this is where Erik says and Erik says this is when counseling really comes in to help with that.
Absolutely. Including the parents, siblings, teachers.
Yes, because it's a big adjustment for everybody. When he's saying that, there is a show on, I don't remember what it was on, TLC or something, called Jazz, and about a young girl who transitioned from, male to female, and everybody was on board with that. And they lived, I think, in Miami or something. Of course, they had a pretty nice income coming in, so they could afford more things. But it really brought an awareness to TV. TLC, Erik says it came on.
Oh, okay.
TLC, yeah, at a very young
Check
age.
that out.
Yeah.
Is there a movement? Oh wait, talking about over sexualizing children, there are a lot of parents that are complaining that children in third grade, second grade, whatever, are getting this information, not reading, writing, and arithmetic, but like how to have anal sex and things like that. What do you think about that? The over sexualizing of young children.
Well, Erik says, of teaching that in the schools.
Yeah, they have whole
Jesus.
curriculums that are just. I would not want my kid to know that when they're 7 years old. Are you kidding me?
No. No. Well, Erik says,
innocence for a little while, please.
I know it. I know it. Erik says, well, some of that came in because nobody was teaching them anything.
Yeah.
So then it falls on the school. The teachers are supposed to teach the kids. And I know someone personally, when I asked, did you teach your daughter about menstrual cycle? No, that's what the school's for. And
Yeah.
I'm just like,
It's uncomfortable. They don't want to talk about the birds and the bees, but in school we always had a 5th or 6th grade.
that's what
The birds and the bees type thing, not
yeah.
how to have anal sex the best or how to give a blowjob or anything like that.
Well, Erik says that kind of education is not really education. That's more street talking than
Yeah.
anything, kids, and that's not education. And Erik says there's an age appropriateness of teaching kids.
Of course. Okay.
Because now they're going to be thinking this is what you have to do.
Yeah.
Erik says some of that came in because they're trying to cover both
Oh yeah.
gay and all that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Erik says that doesn't. Erik says not at that age. Erik says
parents really ought to take more responsibility in teaching children about these things when it's age appropriate and not just dump it on the school. All right. Is this movement to help children and parents get back to the basics and allow children to go through the natural phases of development?
Well, the people who are when the people teaching this or the
movement, I don't know, to help. I don't know. I'm not really sure. What do you think this person's saying, Erik?
Well, Erik says about them teaching and doing all of this, and he's saying that no, this isn't to bring things together. It's like they don't know what to do now. Is this now? He's going to answer it. Is this about the fluidity, the trans, and all of that coming in to bring people together and stuff? He says it's forcing us to be together.
Yeah,
because we're not.
Okay. Are they here to usher us something or a life or way of not having such focus on gender and bringing in more equality? That's a good question.
That is a good question. Erik said yes to that one. He just says yes. That's all he has to add. Yes.
Okay. Apparently, I didn't know this. Apparently, a lot of autistic kids are transgender. Are these kids misdiagnosed as transgender, that being a symptom of their autism, or are they actually transgender?
Well,
I mean, compared to the neurotypical population.
Erik says that there's a good portion of the children who are autistic don't really relate to one or the other.
Oh, I see. I could see that. Yeah.
But we're the ones that make them relate to one or the other. Wear this pink dress, wear this pair of pants. We're the ones that are trying. And they're not feeling it. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like, what feels good to them. And that's the whole thing. Not the whole thing, but one of the things about autism is they're all about sensory and how things feel, So it's that. Are there some transgenders in that group? He said, of course there is.
In every group. Yeah.
Yeah.
If so, is there a connection between being autistic and being transgender at the same time? I don't
Well,
know.
he said, yeah, you can be autistic and trans at the same time.
Okay, what's the connection? Why is that? Just like it is between being transgender and neurotypical, that connection? It's kind of the same.
Yes.
No
He said yes.
special. Okay.
Yeah.
Are we as a society pushing kids to choose? Why can't boys play with babies and dolls and girls play with trucks? Are we making the child question that if they like opposite gender toys and colors, then something is wrong with them?
Mm,
And then that
Eric,
starts get them to start that leads them to start gender identifying themselves?
boat floating down the stream, he says, making the boys play with a truck or the girls play with a doll.
Yeah.
That's not what starts it, because
Oh.
he said, a good portion of these young adults, children, start noticing something around age 2 or 3.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Like something don't feel good to them, but they don't have the verbiage to say.
Yeah.
But he says, but some of them do
Oh.
say, I'm a boy or I'm a girl or whatever,
But I know there must be parents out there that say, don't wear pink. Don't choose that when you're shopping at Target or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Boy, that's a girl's color. Or, mommy, I want this doll. Nope, nope, that's for girls only. And don't cry, that's only for girls. Things like that. We tend to do that with a lot of people tend to do that with their children to try to force them to choose a certain gender.
Well, he says what happens when we do that to our kids, we're already showing them how to stuff down what they're feeling.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with pink. Pink is, he says, as it's a beautiful color.
Mhm.
And that's why kids get attracted to those colors. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that they're a boy or they're a girl. It doesn't mean anything. It has nothing to do with
Two of
that.
my grandkids, the 4 and the 2-year-old, love cars and trucks and things like that. Why not?
Exactly. And who knows, let's say the ones that are the females that are loving those things, who knows what they were from a previous lifetime.
Yeah, these are both girls. I forgot to say
Okay,
that.
both
Yeah,
girls.
right.
So who knows what they were in previous lifetimes?
Right.
One could grow up to be an awesome mechanic that makes millions, and another one could be a race car driver.
I was thinking the same thing. What the heck?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a divisive topic fraught with a lot of anger and righteousness. For the alien races that have evolved to the point of gender neutrality, was their evolution similar? And can they give us advice? Wow, love it.
Erik says that they dealt with something like what we are dealing with, but not to the magnitude that we are. Because I feel like it the way Erik has shown me, because they didn't have such a heavy iron fist on them like we do with us. So it wasn't as difficult, but it's almost like they had that section to go through, but it didn't last as long.
Okay.
Is what he's telling. I don't know, the way he showed me, it just didn't last as long. He's saying it's like more people were receptive to hearing it.
Okay.
I guess would be a good way.
Any advice from those alien races, Erik?
Well, he says that it's having a platform like this and other platforms and people who are in the public eye, who are transgender, who are, and some people aren't transgender, but they feel they're maybe male or female, but they feel so strong in one, like they're male, but they're female, but they don't want to change, do
Yeah.
any surgical stuff, but they're very masculine in that. And as he's telling me that, I think he's showing me a female actor, that she's definitely female, but she has a lot of masculinity to her. But seeing that, he says, just people speaking out, and there's more books coming out, more books. And he says there are people who are advocating though for more help for the teenagers and stuff like that, because that's where the big help is needed. Because once you turn 21 or 18, whatever, then you can move out from your parents' house. And so,
but a lot of people, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, go on.
I mean, a lot of people have, a lot of women have a lot of masculine energy. My sister is one, and I have a tendency to have, to speak my mind and be assertive and things like that. A lot of masculine energy, and there's some men with a lot of feminine energy, but that are not transgender. They're just a balance of masculine and feminine energy, right?
Correct. Because we're both male and female. So yes, and and there's I know several men who are very feminine, and they are 100% heterosexual, if you want to label them that way. Would they have a problem? Have they dabbled in that other stuff? Probably some, but it's just not their cup of tea.
Okay. How do those who cannot follow through with gender reassignment come to terms with their gender dysphoria and suffer less intense internal turmoil?
I know.
And why does it happen at all? And not everybody can afford to go through the reassignment process.
Oh, I know. It's Erik is showing me that there are some places, and probably in your bigger cities, not in the South, that are trying to set up nonprofit organizations to help with this, and to help kids get employment, and where the employers will help with this. I say help so far as like allot them the time off that they need, or and have insurance to cover. And that's something else. When he's saying insurance, there are insurance companies now that are allowing coverage for that type of stuff.
Okay.
Yes. So maybe not 100% like as if you had a hysterectomy, but it would cover. There's things that it will definitely cover, and every dollar is a plus. But he said, this is how we he says it's up to us, and it's like, ask yourself what can you do to see about getting help for these kids. Like I don't know, talk about it, bring in needs to be done, and there will be around so people can go there and get help with this. Erik says there's also the counseling to help them to be okay with themselves the way they are for now.
Yeah.
Because Erik says, we are powerful creators. So if this is truly what we want, we can create this down the road for it to happen.
Yeah.
And the way he keeps showing me the top, so I guess it's much cheaper to get the top altered than it is the bottom part. So and he says, and that's a little bit more in-depth surgery, he's telling me, obviously, and that needs a lot of psychological treatment too, I guess, some counseling to help with that process.
Okay. Erik, what do you think about the military paying, in other words, taxpayer paying for gender reassignment surgery for the soldiers?
Erik says, why not?
Okay. So I consider myself non-binary because I feel equally masculine and feminine. For someone like me, maybe I asked this. Can our soul be aligned with equal parts of us? No, I didn't ask this. Masculine and feminine energy?
Can our soul be aligned with both?
With equal parts of masculine and feminine?
Of course. He said,
Oh.
Erik says, of course.
Yeah. How much of this phenomena can be attributed to pesticide, microplastic-induced hormonal imbalances? What percentage, if any?
Erik says for the people who are, he says, we're born this way.
Yeah.
He says the plastics and the pesticides. Erik tells me that doesn't come into that. Now that stuff, he says, cause birth defects and
Yeah.
problems in that area, you know,
Maybe
that
it can
kind of
alter
stuff.
hormones, but just maybe, I don't know. But it doesn't cause gender dysphoria.
Correct.
Okay, I got
Correct. Correct.
it. Is this
And you know,
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, because there are people Erik has shown me who are transgender, who are very feminine, very, very feminine, because they were born a woman and they were very feminine looking.
Mhm.
But they are not. They feel masculine, you know, inside, even though they're like when he's saying that that one actor, Elliot Page, I think her name
Okay.
his name is now. Before she trans, and I say she, and I apologize, Elliot. Before Elliot trans, I thought she's very feminine.
Mm.
And then when he trans, you know, it was totally different. So Erik says that doesn't do that. He says, now
Yeah.
it does mess with your hormones and other parts of you to where you could have a lot of physical problems.
All right.
And
So
mental.
think about Caitlyn Jenner, Bruce
Mhm.
Jenner. You know, he transitioned to a she,
Right.
and but he loves women. He's sexually attracted to women. Can you talk about him a little bit?
Well, Erik says, you know, and I'm asking him, like, I'm saying, is she a lesbian now, Erik? And he says, you know, let's see, he's like, not everybody's going to want to fall in love with the opposite sex once they transition.
Yeah. Okay.
There are just as many who are sexually attracted to the opposite gender once they transition,
Okay.
as there are people who are still that are sexually attracted to the same sex once they trans. You know,
Okay.
he says there's no difference in that. You know,
All right.
they're just attracted to who they feel attracted to.
Okay.
And he says, and there's something to do though with he says there's gentleness involved with some of that, is why they might want to, why some go to women who trans to women.
Okay. Interesting. Is this phenomena an introductory part of a hybridization agenda, possibly as a lead up to ET contact to somehow acclimatize humans to the idea of a chimeric species? Wow, that was unexpected.
That's deep. Erik is showing me what this person is meaning in that whole sentence or two. No, it is not that. No, it is not that, he says.
All right. Where does asexuality come from? I just got a couple more questions.
Erik says asexuality is more of a, he says it's more of a safe haven, you know, they just don't care for either of it. And there are some people who do come in that are just, it's almost like they don't, it's like people that can't smell. There's
Oh,
people that just don't come in and don't do anything, and their
yeah.
hormone levels are right and all this other stuff, but they just don't come in. Erik does say some of that is previous lifetime stuff.
Yeah, like what would be the most common past life experience that would lead a person to incarnate as an asexual?
Well, he says, of course, rape.
Oh yeah.
He says, prostitution, selling, that kind of stuff. Beaten for being one way or another, and that can come in that way. And
Yeah.
he says, and just not. Erik says, yeah, just beaten, raped, and all of these things from previous lives. So in this life, you keep yourself safe. You don't really have that intimate relationship with anybody.
And I guess it could be an experience from the current life too, right?
Oh, definitely. Erik says definitely for this
Any-
life.
Anything else about asexuality, or will that cover it, you think?
Well, he says, in this, for current life, the same occurrences could happen in this life. And, they developed at a young age or an older age that if they stay neutral, then they don't have to deal with those parts. And he says, there's exceptions to every rule, so this doesn't apply to everybody. But usually it's due to trauma,
Okay.
both present and previous life.
Was Michael Jackson asexual, bisexual, heterosexual?
Erik says Erik says if he had to label him some way, he would label him as asexual.
Okay. All right. Now, is it true? Is it true there were so-called two-spirit individuals in pre-Christian times who held important spiritual, holistic warrior roles in various communities, pagan, Native American? And if so, what were they called? Gender marker. And when did their roles change? I don't understand this. Two-spirit individuals. You know what they're talking about, Erik?
He says, long eons ago, there wasn't a spirit that two spirits where they said, okay, one is this and one is that. He says that didn't happen. But there are, like a CEO from one group, a CEO for another group or whatever, who are saying, they're like the gods, I guess you could say,
okay.
doing stuff like that. Yes, there was that, and I feel like there still is that to a degree. Yeah.
Okay. Now, from what I understand, in like the Roman times, homosexuality was completely acceptable. And I mean, homosexual activity. I mean, maybe they weren't gay, but men had relationships with men, girls with girls, etc. Can you speak about that? And I'm going to text my husband.
Well, Erik says, back then and even before then, things weren't labeled as taboo or wrong or inappropriate or whatever. It's just you just went with what felt right, depending on it.
Yeah.
He says it's just
I mean, you see it in the animal sector too.
yes. And Erik is saying that, and it started happening before then, but then it's like this other energy or these other whatever. I just feel like it's an energy, what he's showing me is wanting to make fun of it or saying it's wrong, because it's almost like the control wasn't there, so now we had to label it a certain way.
I got you.
Yeah, so and then we started saying it was about power, Erik says.
Because some of that could have been driven just by pure sexual appetite and not like a romantic love for the same sex person, etc. Right?
Erik says correct, and then some of it was because they loved, Erik says,
Okay.
hundreds of thousands, well, thousands plus I don't know, he showed me thousands and thousands and thousands years ago. You know, we didn't have what we call a marriage, you know, where you had to stick with
Yeah, I
one
didn't think
person
about that.
and adultery and that. There wasn't any of that. It was just who, it's just like when you came together, if that happened, it happened, and it wasn't made a, a big deal wasn't made out of it. So there wasn't any of that. He says they didn't have rape and um, I don't know, you know, just that being monogamous just wasn't a word because
Right.
it's just with whatever, you know. And when I say that, I don't mean it like with whatever. It's just whoever you gravitated to. So it wasn't a focus, oh my God, I gotta have sex, or oh my God, I gotta have her, or I gotta have him. It just wasn't that way. It's just organically
Yeah.
things developed. Yeah.
Makes sense. Much like the animal kingdom, where they don't mate, where some species don't mate for life, but some do.
Right.
All
Right.
right. So I remember you saying when we were talking about gender through Jamie Butler, I think you said that you felt like bisexuality is probably the most evolved because love is love is love. Do you stick with that now, or is there no hierarchy?
Well, he says he does stick with that, you know, he does stick with that. That's not saying that others are less than, but, you know, he says true, you know, bisexual, which is now fluid,
Okay, right.
you know, that they don't have a, well, he says when you're fluid, you don't have a preference. It's more of the energetic connection.
Oh, like they do in spirit, probably
Yes,
energy to energy.
yes.
Okay.
And it can be you meet this amazing, you know, woman, and if you're a woman and you just fall in love, and it may last for a year or two, but then there could be this amazing man that comes along that you're with for 20 years. You know, it just it but he says yes, because they don't put themselves in a box.
I like that. So,
Mhm.
anything else you want to add before we close?
Well, you know, he says this is he's saying that this topic will come up again for you to do. And he says, because this is good for people to get a little bit more information on it,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of curious people out there, but they don't know who to ask.
Yeah.
Um, and
Ask Erik.
yes, definitely. And if Erik says, and if you know of someone who is transitioning or who is trans or who is fluid, ask them, because he says they would love to educate you,
Sure.
and
Absolutely.
instead of you trying to educate yourself from the streets.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you, Denise. Thank you, Erik. I love y'all both. You guys be sure again to check out Denise, healer, medium. You name it, she does it. She's an awesome light worker at deniseramon.com. And be sure you subscribe to this channel and also the Atlantis Scalar YouTube channel. All right. Bye,
Big
everyone.
hugs.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.